People of African Descent New Thought Group proudly present Celebrating Our Soul, Consciously Creating Change. Our partner, New Thought Media Network, is offering this interview series to highlight some of the luminaries who will present at this amazing event. For more information, go to padntg.com. Stay tuned for a wonderful interview. Peace and blessings.
Good afternoon, and welcome to this fabulous interview. And I'm saying fabulous before we get started with Reverend Deborah Johnson as we prepare for Celebrating Our Soul, the second event. And the theme of it is consciously creating change. And so we know that that is a key thing right now. And this conference, by the way, is being put on by New Thought ministers or New Thought community of African descent. So we want to say that right up front. It's happening in August, and we'll just get started. Good afternoon, Reverend Deborah. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you doing?
Doing well, doing well. And so glad that you're here with us today so that we can talk about this event, talk about the people who are sponsoring the event, and more importantly, talking about what you bring, what you may be talking about at the conference, and just a couple of questions in that. So if you could just start off and give us a little bit about yourself, we'll be off and running.
Okay, well, I'm Reverend Deborah Johnson, also known as Rev D. I am the founding and senior minister at Inner Light Ministries in Santa Cruz, California. Founded it in 1997 and modeled it after my experience of being a Vision Corps member of the Agape International Center in Los Angeles. Been in the movement a really long time. Started as a pup. I graduated as a practitioner back in 1986 and finished the Holmes Institute ministerial program in 96 and have been pretty much ever since then teaching at Holmes Institute, specializing in New Thought, history, social justice, diversity things, which happens to be my background as metaphysical Bible interpretation. I'm on the advisory council for the Association of Global New Thought, sometimes referred to as AGENT, and am very passionate about spirituality and social justice. And in my mind, I can't even separate them.
Right. And I think that's key. And I think that's, for me, that's one of the reasons why this conference is so important, because the conference is by African American descented, if you will, New Thought, metaphysical individuals. And from our history, they may have said there was a separation of church and state, and I get it. But in our community, God is always first, and anything that happens comes from there, however it comes out, I think.
Yes, that's true. And I think we have a misunderstanding about that. The separation of church and state is at an institutional level.
Yes.
To say that the government cannot set up a particular religion and say you have to do that particular one. But you can never, ever, ever separate politics and spirituality. It's impossible. Yes. Because every politic is based upon some sort of idea of who we are as humanity. Even our preamble to the Declaration of Independence, you don't get more spiritual than that.
Yes.
Hold these truths, self-evident, endowed by Creator. Just saying.
Yeah. And I think, and that's perfect, because it speaks right to the theme of this year's event, which is consciously creating change. And that whole foundation there is set up on the idea that we are a melting pot, if you will, take a shortcut on bringing people with different ideas and ideas and ideologies and cultures to create one dynamic, diverse oneness where we get benefits from everyone. What would you say about how that fits in with this and the theme?
Well, when we look at the New Thought movement, rarely are you going to find anybody over the age of 30
Yeah,
that was actually raised in New Thought.
yeah, yeah. Very few.
So we've all migrated there from whatever our various backgrounds and traditions are. And even at that, so many people in the New Thought movement are still also engaged in other practices as well. Whether
Mm-hmm.
it's something with, Yoruba or Buddhism or Sufism or, something like
Yes,
that.
yes,
So there's all these different traditions that come together. But what I can say, I feel very emphatically, is that because of the cultural heritage of those of us from the African diaspora, there's a way that we relate to social issues as being part and parcel of our spirituality and our spiritual journey. A lot of the New Thought movement historically has not gotten involved
yes,
in things that have to do with collective consciousness and larger areas of social change. And what I can say is that the mark and the imprint I see on the New Thought movement that people of African descent have brought are two things. One, this consciousness about social justice,
hmm
and two, the music.
yes. Yes, and I know
The
from the last
music,
time I was
we
there, the
emote.
music is there. Yes. Well, and that's you bring up two good points. I'll bring the best one first, the music, right? In that in our community, when we were which if you come from a church background or Christian background, and you went to one of the black churches, they would always say the music, the preacher may get you in there, but it's the music that keeps you. The music
Yes,
is what keeps you in that church. If you go to a church and there's no music, because in our culture that was a representation of spirit
yes,
moving.
yes,
And so if that church didn't have a spirit, if you will, nothing was happening. And there was not a black church that was not active in the movement from the very beginning. If we go all the way back to Nat Turner and all of that. So it is important that we look at this consciousness of change, not only in the our community but the greater community, because we can't separate the two.
right. And
So
there's an experience that I don't think is kind of appreciated enough within the broader New Thought movement.
yes,
I've spoken out about this, many times throughout the years, is that a part of what the church brought for African Americans in particular, and I know we're not all from America, but it's sort of like Black church experience, even if
yes,
you're coming from Jamaica or someplace else. It was a place for you to be in the majority. Okay.
mm-hmm,
It was a place to
mm-hmm,
break from the kind of microaggressions of racism and all of that stuff that you have all during the week, wherever you are in your jobs or these other things. And it was a time of like cultural coming together and expression.
yeah,
And what winds up happening is that for many people, they're having to make a decision
mm-hmm,
between theology,
mm-hmm,
I like what you're saying, but I'm not necessarily feeling it emotionally from a cultural standpoint. And there's all kinds of ways that we thread that needle, go to the New Thought Church during the day and go and, hook up online or something to get some good gospel. Even if we don't agree with all the theology, it's
yes,
got the rhythm in it,
yes,
you know, and it
yes,
has the beat. So to come together, to have a place where there's more than just a few of us at a time.
Mm-hmm.
To be able to come together from different walks of life and places within the country and whatnot, that it is a special event, and for many of us, a first time. Like a first time. And the reason why I'm being so emphatic about that is not only as an invitation to
Yes.
people of African descent to come, but to try to help calm any fears that anybody who's not of African descent might
Mm-hmm.
have about our motive.
Yeah.
And why are we doing this? Are
Yeah.
we trying to separate or distance out? And isn't this the antithesis of
Yeah.
oneness?
Yeah.
It's just the opposite.
Yeah.
There's the celebration of the beauty of the diversity, and the coming together is not to keep anybody out. It's to uplift each other so we can be more present
Yeah.
for the multicultural work.
Yeah.
Because it's been rough these last few years. We are drained.
Yeah. And you got so many sparks going off in my mind here. I don't even know where to go next. But the one thing I think that's key there is that as we see DEIB and some of the other institutions and where they have been placed are beginning to unravel, it it's beginning to create fear again because people don't know what, and what we're saying is we can't bring ourselves wholly to the table if we're not whole ourselves. So I love that.
Yes.
And I guess, how would you, for those of us who may not want to get involved because they may feel some type of way about that, what would you say to that to make sure we get everybody at the table, so to speak?
What I would say is that there's room for everybody. Okay. And everybody doesn't have to do everything.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You don't necessarily have to look at the news all the time, but that's not a ticket to not be informed.
Yes.
You don't have to march in the streets, but that's not an excuse not to pray.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, what I would say is that, like Ernest Holmes used to say, treat and move your feet.
Move your feet.
We do both.
Yes.
It's an and. We go spiritually deep, and then we do whatever it is we're called to do.
Right.
Maybe your job is to cook. Maybe your job is to teach the kids.
Yeah.
Maybe your job is the public debates. Maybe your job is registering people to vote. You can find what's right for you. Just show up.
And that's such a great point, because if you go back to the church or any other organizations that were part of the Black Power movement or anything that came out of that SNCC, any of them, everyone in the organization knew what they had to do, whether it was something that they wanted to do or not. They had a calling, if you will, an urge and a skill. If they were having church dinners, you always knew who was going to be in the kitchen, right? If you were organizing a march, you knew who was going to make the signs.
I saw James Lowry. He was one of the greats that marched with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And he was talking about one of the marches that he was doing and how the government was passing, this was in the 60s, was passing out free hams to the Black community to try to persuade them not to march. So he said how disappointed he was because all these Black folks were taking these hams.
Right.
And when it came time for the march, he said it even started to rain. And he's like, oh, God, are you against us too? So as the days went on and they finally made it to the Capitol, lo and behold, there were station wagons full of ham sandwiches for the marchers.
Yes. Yes.
And I will never forget that. And it was like, you know what? maybe you make the sandwiches.
Yes. Yes. And because
Everybody's
everything's
got a
needed.
role.
Yeah, everything's needed. I love that. I love that. And so when we look at the conference, we're gonna have children at the conference. There's a children's piece there. Um,
Mhm.
and I think one of the key things that I'd like you to expound on a little bit is the whole idea, and you did just then, but this whole idea of a working community. Because one thing that came clear when you were speaking was that when we are in a community of our own, if you will, it gives us permission to step up where we know we may not have been stepping up, or even get the courage to step up for the first time. And I think that's one of the beauties of this conference, is because culturally and all of the idiosyncrasies that we have will be present, and I don't have to be guarded and thinking about, am I out of place? That makes sense.
Of course. And that's it. It's that it becomes an environment for some self-care and some self-reflection.
Mm-hmm.
There's a diversity term that's gotten kind of popular, and it's referred to as code switching.
Mm-hmm.
And what code switching is, it's where you learn to do what is appropriate in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
The New Thought movement is pretty cerebral. It's pretty intellectual by a lot of sort of spiritual standards, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So the people who come to the New Thought movement tend to be educated,
Right.
tend
Yeah.
to be what we call acculturated, people who can maneuver and be successful in a white dominant society, as well as be with their own group, with
Yeah.
their own sort of, ethnic group.
Yeah.
So throughout the day, there's this constant sort of like back and forth, this code switching, and it happens so quickly
Yeah.
that we're not even paying attention to it.
Yeah.
It would be like if you're uh, bilingual
Mm-hmm.
and knowing when do you speak which
Yeah.
language,
Yes.
and having to constantly interpret,
Yes.
having to live your life all the time through the language that's not like your indigenous tongue.
Yeah.
So when you have a chance to be in an environment where you don't have to code switch, when you have a chance to be in an environment where other people are also speaking your native tongue,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it gets to be exciting, and it is invigorating.
Yeah.
I don't think I, I really don't think there can be enough empathy and understanding of what it means to be Black in this world right now.
Mm-hmm.
Just from physical safety, issues with the police, from voting rights to the attacks on critical race theory, and DEI, the gerrymandering
Yeah.
of the districts. I mean,
Yeah.
it just, even the healthcare stuff. Black women die 4 times the rate of white women in childbirth. So when you have all of these new laws and whatnot where you can't get the health care, it's like it's compounded and
Yeah.
compounded and
Yeah.
compounded. And we need a space to regroup. We need
Mm-hmm.
a space to recharge, to to talk to each other, to laugh, to joke, to hear what other people are doing, to get
Mm-hmm.
inspired by it, and just laugh and have a good time,
Yeah.
because we're exhausted, but we don't have the luxury to be tired right now. Not in
You know,
2024.
right. you again, my mind is moving at warp speed with all that nuggets you dropped out there. But right now reminds me when I look at what went on from like between 68 and 72, right? When students were getting involved and there was all of this stuff, that same environment, that same energy is here 50 some odd years later. And I think, new thought in our community right now will be pivotal because, as you were talking about the intellectuals, I'm thinking there was that conversation at one time that new thought is for the cultural creatives. Well, I mean, our culture is real creative because we've had to create, right? So, so I think the environment is set to be able to take advantage of this. And I'd like to hear what you have to say about how do we begin to present this idea to African Americans or people of the African diaspora who aren't aware of it or who haven't figured out how to, as you say, live in both worlds, because that's the world we come from and no one's telling us to abandon ourselves.
Well, the irony of the situation here is that this code switching thing that I'm talking about and all that, it works both ways.
Right.
And so many people of African descent are feeling insulted by the traditional interpretations of scripture and are having a hard time with the more fundamentalists approach of this is the one and the only way.
Right.
And they look around and they have the utmost regard for the Muslim brothers and sisters. They've got the utmost regard, for people who are practicing other traditions or Sikhs or coming in from India or whatnot. And they're looking for a worship environment. They're looking for a religious teaching that is expansive enough to be able to hold the beloved community and the beautiful oneness that we're striving for. What I love about the New Thought movement is that you don't have to convert. You can still be whatever it is that you are. Take these principles and use them where you are. And particularly since COVID, folks are truly shopping, hopping, online so they can, because they don't have to make a choice.
Right.
I can still be at, Baptist Tabernacle, holiness.
Yes.
Take you by the river church in the morning. And then I can go and I can listen to some other things, in the evening and not feel like I'm like I have to make a choice.
Right.
Okay. And we are open. We are so open. But one of the things that I do want to caution, and with our broader New Thought movement, is that we got to cut with the tendency sometimes to want to poke fun at Christians or Pentecostals or to say negative things about Jesus. Don't play that. But Black folks, Latino, we don't play that.
Right.
Because culturally, we're coming from someplace else and we have a different accountability. You have to answer to your family. Who's your pastor? You got to answer to your family about where it is that you worship, and they want to vet it.
Yes.
They want to check it out. So when we come to conferences like this, we're coming with that family. It's not a personal, individual thing with us.
Yes.
No. Worship. It's a communal thing.
And you brought back a flashback there. That's why I was jumping, because I was born a Christian. I was a Muslim before I stepped into New Thought. And a person asked me when I was getting ready to finish ministerial school, well, what are you going to do? Well, I didn't look at it as a religion. They said it was a way of life. I said, oh, I look at this as a Sufi order, and I'm going to be an Islamic religious scientist. And they said, oh, no, 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 you can't do that. You can't be that.
You
Right?
can.
And so that broader understanding has to understand, as you said, in the community, everybody's in the house, everybody's at the picnic table, and it creates a wholeness there. Now, here's something I want to ask, because you brought something up about our community and our way of traditional spiritual worship. Traditionally we're storytellers, right? And we talked earlier, you talked about the theologian, and we also know we have those in our community, but we also have the preacher. And the preacher is the storyteller. He's taking that metaphysics and putting it in a story to help you get to the theology, maybe, if they're on that trajectory. So how do you think, we begin to teach, if you will, from our perspective, so that more of our people will come, because it's not so intellectual?
I think we have to stop being apologetic, okay, and come out our spiritual closets, okay, because a lot of us are hiding, and we're not being honest, and we're not being truthful about our religious experience, trying to protect it so that it doesn't get like marginalized or demonized.
Mm-hmm.
Part of that story that needs to be told in terms of the narratives is that there's more in common than we might even think. And it's a false dichotomy to set it up as though these things are separate and distinct.
Right.
I was raised in Los Angeles, and the Pentecostal movement and religious science both started in Los Angeles, just a few miles away from my family home that's still in the family.
Nice.
At the same time, they were just a couple of blocks away. The Azusa revival that started the Pentecostal movement and religious science, Ernest Holmes, which is the group that I studied under, Ernest Holmes would go down to the Pentecostals on a regular basis. And what the early New Thought people were trying to do is they were trying to figure out, what did Jesus know?
Yes.
How was it that he was able to heal so, and saw him as the master physician?
Right.
So what the New Thought people were doing was believing in the same faith healing, but just believing that it's open to everybody, and you don't necessarily have to have a special gift.
Right.
That it's open and available to everybody. But this sort of realm of the deep, this isn't Sunday stuff, that it's everyday stuff. It's the way you be, it's the way you show up, it's the relationship that you have with the divine. If we speak of it this way, there's enough commonality for folks to get it and go, oh, you haven't walked away from God. You haven't betrayed our roots.
Yes.
You really are connected to something. And because we don't speak enough about what we believe, we're leaving it up to people's imaginations that we're doing all this stuff we're not even doing. Their fear of who we are is worse than the truth. We're more alike, but they don't know it because we're not telling our story.
Which is always the case, right? The trouble you think you are in is almost infinitely more creative than it actually is, right? And I think one of the good things about the conference from being there is that you get to meet new thoughters from unity and from religious science and all of the different brands and independents. Dr. Barbara King and her community, and Jack Bowman. I mean, it's such a diverse that covers all of the spectrum from
Mhm.
a lot of our community. Because I just remember when I first started becoming interested, and I'd like you to speak to this. You joked it a little bit there, is about the internal angst that one may have when they switch. Because I, coming from an Islamic tradition, there was talking about a lot of things that appeared to be not in agreement, but the thing that stuck with me was a way of life. Because in Islam they say a way of life, and that's what you were just saying about new thoughts. So if you could talk a little bit more about that, that'd be great, because I'm sure a lot of people are having that struggle.
Yes. Um, I've been doing prison work for like 20 something years. And our primary our primary partner is the Muslim American Society. And we've done, like work with them since like 2000,
Nice.
or so. And it's work that I really, really love. There's a phrase that I like, and it's decolonize our minds.
Mm, mm,
Okay, we have to decolonize our minds. We have an indigenous soul.
mhm.
Everybody has an indigenous soul. And the most indigenous part of you knows that it is part of the whole. The most indigenous part of you knows you belong. Okay. That most indigenous part of you
Mhm.
feels a sense of connection to something.
Yeah.
And that I'll call that our spirituality. We've traded that in for religion. Okay. We've traded that in for the institutionalization and all of the cultural overlays, and we're we spend more time trying to be true to a religion than
Mhm.
trying to be true to our spirituality. And that, I think, is that fundamental decision, so to speak, that everybody who's really on the journey has to make. And it doesn't mean necessarily that you have to leave your tradition, but you do have to give yourself permission to know the divine on your own authentic terms.
Yes. Yes. I love that. I love that because, you know, as we were talking about the Pentecostal church, I had a uncle who was Pentecostal, man, a couple actually. And when you went in there, once the spirit hit, like it became spiritual, right? There was no the concept of a religion was in the background,
Mhm.
but the foreground was I am going to give myself wholly and fully to the spirit that sustains all things, and no one's going to find any fault with it. And
Exactly.
I love that, because when I look at what's on the horizon and how this conference might grow, um, I'm just curious of your thoughts on that. You know, where the conference might be in 4 to 8 years, and how do we get that engagement?
I really, really hope that the conference continues to grow. I do. And I would really encourage us, and I would love an opportunity for us to also, at some points in times, have an even broader conference where we have some dialogue and some discussion with our counterparts of people who are not New Thought.
Mm-hmm.
Back in 2008, Dr. David Alexander, who's now has one of the Centers for Spiritual Living pulpits in Atlanta, put
Yes.
together this conference in Atlanta, and we went. And part of the reason why I went was because it was going to be such a big cross section. And it was
Mhm.
at that conference that I had a chance to meet Dr. Will Coleman.
Oh, yeah.
And it was at that conference, I had a chance to meet a lot of people. I've had a chance to go to Accra with Brother Ishmael Tete
Mhm.
and to see, how they're doing things in Africa, which is different than how we're doing it in America. And
Yes.
yet, so much the same. I really hope that we continue, that we spread it out open. And I also hope that we make it plain the things that you and I are saying now.
Mhm.
I would like to us to show up in the New Thought movement
Yeah.
as a force,
Mhm.
as a constituency, and say we have something to offer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, as opposed to feeling like any mention of diversity or race or whatnot is going to mean divisiveness or
Yeah.
division.
Yeah. Yeah. And as again, I'm just thinking it would be great in 6 to 8, 6 to 10 years to have a African diaspora where we, you were talking about Brother Ishmael Tete, would be to get from all the different diaspora of Africa to bring together somewhere for a conference to again to share and see how we're different
Yes,
but the same.
that would be wonderful.
Yeah.
Come on in from the UK,
Yes.
come in on from Jamaica,
Yes.
come on in from all over the place.
Yeah.
Because you're absolutely right. There's some things that are similar.
Mm-hmm.
There might be things a little different, like in our cultural expression.
Yep.
And because of the way that the transatlantic slave trade worked and all of the rest of that, there is a common thread, of our existence, a common thread of what goes on and happens. And to be honest
Mm-hmm.
with you, I don't know. I don't know whether it's in the DNA or what, because typically when people come to a country by the second, third generation, it's already kind of washed out. Whatever the cultural heritage was, it doesn't stick, it doesn't linger. People become amalgamated and
Yeah.
they
Homogenized.
melt, the melting pot right into that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know what it is about African stuff, but it don't melt.
Right.
um I mean, we've been here for hundreds of years, from the dance steps to the music. I remember when I was in Brother Tete's church, the very first Sunday there. I grew up very Pentecostal with the Holy Rollers. And I'm telling you now, except for the outfits, I thought I was back in my home church. And
Yes.
even as I was just walking up and down the street, I may not have understood exactly what people were saying, but I could tell by the body language. I knew exactly what that conversation
Yes.
was.
Yes. Yes. Those body language and idiosyncrasies and those idioms,
Yes.
even if they're there.
And when we've had this dispersion and all of the things that have gone on and that have happened, there's a strength that we have,
Mm-hmm.
as well as the survivors.
Mm-hmm.
There's a strength that we've had from overcoming.
Yeah.
Um, and it's interesting where it's the ones who've been the most oppressed who are the ones who lead for social change. And they're
Yeah.
also the ones in the forefront of the forgiveness.
Yes.
They
Yes.
actually believe more in the democracy than the people who created it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
there's this
Yeah.
this strength that we have that I think we can get some synergies out of it, where we can be extremely catalytic
Yes.
if we're not isolated anymore.
Now, in the church, we would have encapsulated what you just said in the song of how he got me over, how I made it over.
How I got over. And my
because
soul looks back and wonders.
because you got all of that working at one time to get you there. And that's what I think one of the beauties of this conference will be, is that, as you said, I'm somewhat of an amateur genealogist, and there are things in that DNA that just doesn't go away, right?
No.
And it only takes someone knowing how to hit the right combination button to open the lock, and that thing, and Jack jumps out the box.
And we all need it. That's the thing. We all need it. We all need that kind of grounding. We all need that kind of deep, profound relationship. We need that kind of healing. And let it begin with us. We don't have to wait around. So many people are waiting around to see what's going to happen in the election or what's going to happen here or there. Everything is energy. And it is incumbent upon us to keep recalibrating up to our highest divine frequencies.
Yes.
And opportunities where we can come together in community help us recalibrate. It's like an orchestra or something. It's one thing when you have one little instrument, but you get them all there together. Oh, boy, there's a resonance. There's a vibration that's there. And that vibration, that recalibration impacts more than just the people there. So I'm expecting this PAD conference, this People of African Descent, the New Thought group, I'm expecting our conference to have rippling effects. That it isn't just something we're going to go to and partake and enjoy and leave, but we're going to raise a frequency. We're going to raise a vibration that this world really needs right now.
Right. And that was one of the questions, is that how will this affect going forward, right? It's by one setting that resonance and seeing us be active. And then there's a whole thing with resonance. We ever seen those commercials of Ella Fitzgerald when she could get a resonant with the glass and crack it? That's what we want to do. We want to create a resonance and a sense of action at the conference, that once that resonance starts and it hits the note, all previous examples of that will go away, and we can move to the next frequency or the next vibration, as you said. That's wonderful.
Exactly. It becomes a focus of attention and concentrated energy. There's so much going on right now, and our attention gets scattered, and it's easy for us to lose focus and to get on everything that's trending. And we all need to be still. Be still and know something. Be still and know. Everybody needs to do this in their life. And I want to encourage all of you, if for some reason you can't make this conference, or for some reason you're not a person of African descent, don't just look at this with an envy of, oh, gee, I wish I was there. Affirm this for your own life. Everybody needs to recalibrate. Everybody needs community. Everybody needs that place and space where you can be your authentic self and shine.
You bring up this story, if you will, out of the Bible of Moses, and they were wandering in the desert, and everybody was getting weary, and Moses hit the rock, and the water came out of the rock, and all 12 tribes knew exactly where they should go to get the water. And that's what I just heard you say, is that there's a place there for everybody, and you will know your spot, whether you're part of the African diaspora or not, but you got to get your frequency up. And that's what we want to do.
Exactly. And you don't have to be perfect. You don't, Spirit will use you no matter what. Moses was hiding out.
Yeah.
Moses Moses killed an Egyptian guard and he got out of Dodge. Moses was old when he got the call to go back because he'd been raised in the Pharaoh's house. Jewish
Yes.
guy, but raised like the Pharaoh's grandson. And so many of us will do just what Moses did. There's a burning bush calling him. And he's like, no, I'm not going. No, I'm not. All the excuses. Moses stuttered.
Yes.
He couldn't do, let my people go. He stuttered. The voice says, I'll send your brother Aaron to do the talking. And I get these spiritual downloads. And one of the letters, I
Mhm.
love it, where it says, it says, I don't send the burning bush to the wrong person. Okay. Each of us gets called to do something that feels like it might be too much for us. And we come up
Mhm.
with all the excuses of why not us. Just say yes.
And that happens in both those stories, right? Moses said, no, I can't. And then when Moses went to Aaron, Aaron said, I don't know if I can do this either. He had the skill, but it's that confidence, that resonance that I think the conference will ignite in us and give us, again, to make connections like at a family reunion. And so when people go back to Florida or California or wherever, that we can stay together on that vibration to
Yes.
create this whole thing that we're talking about of conscious creation. How do we consciously create an environment, a world, ecosystem that supports not only our people, but we have to take care of what we know is good for us, you know, and because
Yes.
someone with diabetes, candy ain't good for them. I can eat probably as much as I can until I get sick. And that's just how it is.
Yes. Just how
Wow.
it
Well,
is.
and I'm not sure. Uh, I think I guess one of the last things I want to say, last question would be,
Hmm.
um, well, two questions.
Hmm.
One, if you can tell us what is your presentation going to be about? No, you don't have to give us a topic or any of that, but just what not even the actual thing, but what's rolling around in your head to fit that topic.
I was asked to speak about issues of sexuality. And um, I'm looking forward to it. There was a presentation that I made at the Parliament of the World Religions last
Mm-hmm.
April on gender identity and giving us new tools and whatnot to understand that. Um, but what I can say is that sexuality, and I'm not talking about sexual activity, I'm talking
Mm-hmm.
about like our identities and how we show up in the world and us being able to find not only in our lives, but in the world, the right balance between the yin and the yang. Okay. Giving
Mm-hmm.
ourselves permissions to be like our whole full selves. And similar to what we had been talking about as far as what it means to be a person of African descent, that the masculine and the feminine both have their gifts.
Yes.
Okay. And
Yes.
and how do we embrace all of those gifts in such a way to not just inform our spirituality, but to have our spirituality be a pure expression of it.
Yes. Yes. No, that's a great capstone. And I'll just the last thing would be: is there anything that you want to say that we didn't touch on, or that you think will just be a nice icing on the cake, if you will?
Something we didn't touch on. Yeah. So one of my favorite sayings is that pain pushes until vision pulls.
Mm,
Pain pushes until vision pulls. there's certainly enough out there that we're trying to get away from. Come to this conference so that we're not trying to get away from something, but we're moving in the direction of where we want to go. Let's be
Yes.
pulled up by vision and not just pushed by pain.
Wow. Well, that's a great way to end. I want to thank you, Reverend Deborah Johnson, for being with us and highlighting the fun, the excitement, the education, the reunion, and all of that that's going to take place at Celebrating Our Soul Conference, with the theme of creating or consciously creating change. And so we want to thank you. I hope to see you there. And I look
We
forward
will.
to the reunion and the joyous time we will have. So I want to thank everyone for
Thank you.
tuning in. Please go sign up. I'm sure in the comments you'll see where you can click the button and sign up, and hope to see you there soon. Peace and
Hope to
blessings.
see you there too. Peace and blessings.
This fantastic interview was just an example of the depth and content of those presenting at Celebrating Our Soul, Consciously Creating Change. Go to padntg.com to register. Be there for it.